Hello and welcome back to Costumes in Your Closet with me, Kelly Jean from Adult and Teen Services. This is the next video in our series on DIY costumes from items that you already own and that may be in your closet. In the last video, we talked a little bit about what that means and why you should incorporate your regular everyday clothes into your costumes, as well as some places to seek inspiration for the costumes you want to put together and what you want to be this year. In this video, we're going to talk about what to do and where to go if the pieces that you're looking for aren't already in your closet yet. So, if you've watched the first video, hopefully, if not, jump back and then come back and join me, all right? So hopefully from that video, you were able to find a little bit of inspiration to get you going. You've decided on an idea and you're ready to start putting that costume together. So let's say that you've already looked in your closet and you've struck out. Or maybe you found a piece or two, but not quite enough to pull the whole ensemble together. So where else can you find costume elements other than your closet, the party store, or one of those Halloween pop-up stores? The next place that I recommend looking is in your friend or neighbor's closet. And this is that one man's trash is another man's Halloween costume, all right? So for the most part in this series, I'm talking about the kind of DIY side of costuming. However, for costumes that you buy that are already complete sets, most people don't wear the same costume from year to year. So some people, however, and even though we don't wear the same costumes over and over, we usually hold on to them. And some people have whole bins full of costumes or costume elements, props and wigs, that kind of thing, that you might be able to dig through. So you can try to swap last year's costumes with somebody else, a friend or neighbor, and then you both get a new costume. You can search through if they have a bin, or you can find somebody who's a similar size to you and try to shop their closet in order to find some everyday pieces that you can borrow or barter for. Additionally, in the same principle, for looking into your neighbor's closets, some community organizations have specific costume swaps or other kind of rummage sales around this time of year that you can go and check out and either get completed costumes like that, or once again, those wardrobe elements. Returning to the principle of using your own clothes, you can always opt to expand your wardrobe by shopping at the places you already buy clothes. So that's another place you can go if it's not in your closet yet. Tip for doing that is by buying a multi-purpose item that you can incorporate into both your costume and then later into your daily wear. That does double duty for your dollars. I try to steer away from buying items at full price, especially ones that I'm only going to wear one time. So if I need something that I know that I'm going to make alterations to, then I turn to thrift stores, consignment shops, and secondhand shops. This is where I'd say about 80% of my past costume pieces have come from. So we'll delve a little bit more into that and what that looks like in a minute. So we'll just keep going right now on other places you can find costume elements. Another place you can get some costume pieces might be the dollar store, and that's a cheap and easy way to find things. Although you're unlikely to find garments there, although some do sell like shirts and socks and that kind of thing. There's usually a pretty good variety of other items that you can use to craft and accessorize. This is a good place to get poster board or foam core, for example, which are great things to incorporate into props in particular. I've even used items from their kitchen section for a couple of different pieces, and some of which I will show you in this series. So this costume is an example of one where I did a lot of different shopping in some of those non-traditional and out-of-the-box places. And this is actually one of those places that I also used bits from the kitchen section, which I'll show you in a second. This is a Ghostbuster costume that I did in college. And as a college student, we had no budget for this. So we did a lot of shopping around. We spent more time finding the lowest prices possible so that we could spend far less money. So we use some different elements here, and I'm going to talk through some different places that we found stuff. All right, here is a quick breakdown of that. The costume itself is pretty simple. We just wore black shirts that we already had, some khaki pants and jackets, and then we used colored duct tape and printer paper to temporarily change our clothes so that we could wear them again. The most complicated piece of this costume was the proton packs, but those actually came together with duct tape and hot glue for the most part. The most interesting piece that we bought for this costume is the colander that we got from the groceries. I'm sorry, we got from the dollar store for this one, although you can also get it at a grocery store, which is where we got the tin foil to give it that kind of metal look. So all in all, the places that we went for this, we started with items already in our closet. We went through to a thrift store to get items that we might not have already had. For instance, not everybody had khaki pants for this one. And scrubs were what we found for most people, and that was really successful. We used some recycled items. If you order other things for your costume on Amazon, then you can reuse the box and you get 2 for 1, which is what we did here. And then we just printed out the logo on printer paper as well. If we wanted to do something that was a little bit more long-term, we could have used like an iron-on or a heat vinyl, or even a sublimation printer, which the library has recently acquired. And Sam in our digital media lab is doing a class on that. And if you're interested in stuff like that, go ahead and head over to our DML and ask our wonderful creative services staff more about the options there. They also have a silhouette, which you can use to cut the iron-on or a heat-activated vinyl as well. All right, so that was a quick example. Now I'm going to talk about thrift stores. This, again, is where I find most of the items for my clothing, because there are items that are either already distressed, which works really well for Halloween. There are items that, because I've already spent less money on, and I know that they've already received a whole bunch of wear, I feel a little bit better about making alterations and taking some risks with those items, because I know that it's already been used, and I'm not so worried about the effect if I do make a mistake. So let's talk about thrift stores. This is another place that you can find costume items. For a really long time, this is how I did it, and not a whole lot of other people did it that way. Then it became kind of trendy, and big brand thrift stores in particular have become hip to the secondhand costume trend. And they will also often have displays of donated costumes right at the front of the store. So if you're planning on going this route, though, a word of caution, because they do know about it and they do display it right in the front, make sure that you plan ahead and you go a little bit earlier if you want to go this route, because it does get picked through pretty quickly. They also will often have some props and things up in that area, as well as accessories. So even if you don't end up getting a prefab costume, you can still find some other things in that section. For the most part, when I'm thrifting for costumes, though, I'm still using the principle of finding and adapting real clothes. Occasionally, I'll get some specialty items like a prop or a costume piece that's already made. Here's an example of one way that I was able to do that. One particular year, I went in specifically looking for a hat with the plan to upcycle it for a friend's Mary Poppins costume. And when I went into the store right at the front in that Halloween section, there was an upcycled hat that somebody had already made into a Mary Poppins costume. So they had taken that hat and glued on some faux flowers. So I was able to score a donated piece that had already been altered for that purpose and save myself some time. And here is what that finished piece looked like for my friend. So when you're thrifting, something to look for is kind of good bones in a piece. Ask yourself, is it going to be comfortable? And is it in good shape? Look for any kind of texture, quality, and form. Those are things to be aware of. And then when you're looking at a piece, try to think of ways that you can adapt, alter, or upcycle something. For instance, color and length in particular can usually be pretty easily changed quickly and without a lot of expertise. Speaking of upcycling, here is a quick list of ways you're able to upcycle, change, or alter your finds from the thrift store or wherever else you're getting them in order to better suit your costume. All right, so let's just go through this really quick. You've got distressing, bleaching, dyeing, etc. You can create those iron-on vinyl designs like we were discussing before. You can make stencils for fabric paint. You can use that silhouette machine, the Cameo as well, which I mentioned earlier, as well as the sublimation printer at the library. For less permanent changes, on items that you'd like to wear again or add into your costume, a really great thing to use is, let's see if I can get it to focus. This here is temporary hem tape. And that's something that you can use to change the length of a garment, especially sleeves and your hems on your pants are great places to do that. But it's not restricted to that because it is temporary. So anywhere that you could baste or stitch, this is an easy way to do it without putting any holes in your fabric. If you're okay with small holes, safety pins are a great way to go as well. I do not recommend ever using sewing pins unless you want to add a level of realism to your costume that you weren't exactly intending. So let's keep all the blood fake, right, for our Halloween costumes. Some other suggestions for temporary changes: a light dusting of cinnamon or flour can add some temporary distress, make things look dirty and dingy. If you're going to go that way, make sure that the items that you're using are completely dry so nothing sticks. And then dust it off a little bit or roll it before you throw it in the washer, just to save your garment a little bit so it doesn't like clump up or stick to anything. If it's an item that you really like, test a small area first. Know that other spices like turmeric, for example, is really yellow, and that is probably going to leave a little bit more staining on an item. So use something you either don't care about as much, or again, test a small patch before you go and apply it everywhere. All right, on the same vein, so we've talked about big brand thrift stores. Some other places you can look are virtual options like Depop, ThredUp, and Poshmark, which you can check out as well. But do keep in mind that these items have shipping lead time and are often a little bit more of a markup from other secondhand options, as a lot of these are more designer brands. So if you're planning on doing any thrifting at all, whether it's at a regular store, or I'm sorry, an inline store like a brick and mortar, or an online store, because of the ways that things get picked through and the time that you're going to need, I do recommend, once again, planning ahead. And if you're planning on doing those things, you want to learn more about how to make sure that you get the best experience and the most bang for your buck, stay tuned, because Anna from Adult and Teen Services is going to share some more in-depth tips for getting the most from your secondhand experience in the next video. All right. Next, now that we've talked about some places that you can buy costume items, we're going to talk about how we can evaluate if something is worth buying and adding to your closet. Everyone's budget or threshold is going to be a little bit different. What might be worth buying for me might not be for you. So rather than talking about specific like money costs, I'm going to talk more generally about my philosophy and how I personally evaluate my purchase decisions in order to give you some tips on how to do that as well. So what makes an item worth buying? Outside of just the price tag, kind of the main questions I always ask myself are about adaptability and function. If I find an item and it's either damaged or it's in the wrong size, can I fix it or can I make it functional in a different way? If the answer is no, then I don't get those items. And then a big one also, even with not just secondhand items, but even with new items, is can I clean it? And obviously, if it's a secondhand item, I want to know, can I clean it well? But when I'm purchasing something new and adding it to my personal wardrobe, I want to know, is this dry clean only? Can I throw it in the washing machine? If my husband throws it in there and I'm not home, is it going to ruin the piece? Those are, if I spill ketchup on it or I have something like that, am I going to be able to fix those items? So that may be a factor that you want to consider as well, depending on how well you already take care of your clothes. And you're going to know yourself. I know myself, I'm going to spill the ketchup. So I need to know how to clean this item in order to take care of it and make sure that it gets as much use as possible to save my money. So those three things kind of go together as far as cost goes, because I not only have to consider what I actually pay for the item, but I have to consider anything I might have to pay if I'm deciding to go that route for repairs or cleaning, if I choose to have that done, or even if I'm doing it myself, there's a time cost to consider as well. Another question that I always ask myself that may seem obvious, will I use it? And secondarily, will I use it more than once? So that's another one that's really important. And then the last one, which is a question more for costuming than it is for kind of adding regular clothes. Is it worth it to me? That's a big question. And it's a difficult one to answer. Does it have that wow factor? To use the words of Marie Kondo, does it spark joy? An item can have value just because it feels good. And with costuming, it can go a long way to make something feel signature or unique. And this is usually more true of items like props and accessories that add that context that we've been talking about throughout the series. And plus, the most expensive part of a costume is generally the actual garment or the base clothing itself. Pardon me. That being said, if I had to make one suggestion on something that I think is usually worth buying for a costume, a particular accessory, it would, to set your costume apart, right? It would definitely be wigs. So that's my personal suggestion. They add a ton of impact. They're pretty low maintenance as long as you take care of them when you're putting them away and you clean them after you use them. They're going to last you a long time. They save you so much time in styling. And again, they have just tons of impact. And the best thing for me is at the end of the night when I'm exhausted, I can just take it off and I don't have to take out 1,000 bobby pins in order to style my hair in intricate manners. All right, so let's look at an example and talk a little bit about how I evaluated worth for a costume and made those decisions. So if you came out to the Summer Reading Challenge kickoff this year, you may recognize this picture. This is my mushroom pixie costume, which I wore to our medieval fair. Don't call it a Renaissance fair, it's a medieval fair. And my worth it to me splurge, something that I spent a little bit more money on, was my elf ears there that you can see in this picture. That was worth it to me because I felt like it elevated the look. I didn't have any time costs because I could just slap them on there. And I knew that I could save those items and use them again for the future. Plus, they're a silicone material that's durable and easy to clean. So that is my look here. I'm going to show you another picture in a second. All right. Now, this particular costume, I know I just said that majority of my clothing is thrifted, or majority of my costume clothes are thrifted. This one actually doesn't have any thrifted items, but I was able to use a couple of items from my closet, things that I already owned. And the pieces that I bought are ones that I knew I would use again. And it was worth it to me. It just made me feel really special. And it was worth that extra touch and that a little bit extra expense. It might not be for others. You could really easily recreate this costume and skip the ears altogether, especially with the hat. It's going to cover your ears anyway, or if you did braids instead of kind of curling your hair back. So that was the pieces that I used that were already in my closet. I had a petticoat for my wedding, the peasant style sundress, and what I bought was the hat, the ears, the shawl, and the belt. And then I also had a friend of mine do all my makeup. And so I borrowed some things from her that also was a money saver. So while we're talking about cost and worth, which are not exactly the same thing, but they are definitely interrelated, let's talk about some elements from the first video, topics from the first video, and put it together in an example. So I mentioned this already, but I'll kind of hold it up, see if you can see it. In the last video, I talked about this cape that I used for my wedding. And we're going to use one of those examples as inspiration and talk through how I might be able to style this for another costume other than my ice fairy that I did last year. I think I called it an ice queen before. Some kind of cold weather ethereal thing, right? So if I take this robe or cape and I add on a studded belt, which I'm pretty sure I could find if I spent a little bit more time in my closet, I can pretty easily make a Princess Leia costume. I've already got some base elements together. Plus I already have really long brown hair. So if I just kind of whipped those up into little cinnamon buns, I wouldn't even need a wig. So that's another way that it could save some money. And so between the cape, studded belt that I already have, and my hair, if I just wore a white shirt and maybe khaki pants underneath, although the cape is going to cover most of that, that is a free costume that I can do with items I already have on hand. Now, that being said, it's definitely an impression. It's not a replica. It doesn't look exactly like what she wore in that movie. But let's say that I did want to take that up a notch and use some elements that I already have, but I really want to make it look a little bit more realistic. All right, so let's work through that example here. If you were to really quickly Google a Princess Leia costume, it is going to range from $40 all the way up to $130 for the whole costume. You've got a lot of different options there, and I have a couple of them on the screen here. The first one is just the dress and the belt, and the other one does come with the wig, but neither one of these have the boots or any kind of pant wear underneath, and so there's still there's still items that you need to supplement. So that's just a cost to consider. Now, if I just want to elevate the costume I already have a little bit and make maybe my hair a little more realistic with a wig, or add a belt that's not just a regular studded belt and actually looks more like a costume, that's closer to around 20 bucks. So I went from free to 20 bucks to, if I buy the whole costume altogether, it could cost me more than $100. So you have to ask yourself, what's going to have more impact? Are you willing to pay a little bit more for a more iconic look and more of that kind of wow factor principle? Is that something that's going to make you excited? There are tons of people who spend a lot of time and money on cosplay because it's something that they love doing. It's fun, it's enjoyable. It feels good to spend a lot of time on a costume and make it look exact. There's pride in that. And that has worth. It has value because it's important to that person. However, most of us are not like that. So if that's not what you're looking for, are you willing to spend a little bit more time working on the crafting and the accessories to save a little bit of money, or you just want to skip that altogether and just go with the things that are already in front of you? So that is a quick example of how to do that. So hopefully with our first two videos here, you're ready to start finding costumes and adding them to your closet if they're not already in it. So once again, if you're interested in doing that through thrifting, make sure you stay tuned for our next video for tips on how to get thrifty with secondhand clothes, or jump on to our video afterward and you can move right into how to take the items you have and start to style them and bring them together. So once again, thank you for joining me for Costumes in Your Closet, and we hope you continue to enjoy this DIY costume series.